And it's not just build it and they will come. It's like, no, be in touch with the customer at the beginning, right? Before you've invested all that time and effort and money into building something that no one wants.
Hello and welcome to Traction, the tech show exploring innovation, growth and technology success. I'm James Taylor, founder of Roaring Mouse and a PR advisor to some of the world's most innovative technology companies. I'm here at Pennine 5 in Sheffield with my co-host, Peter Hopton, founder of Very PC, Isotope and Venture Community. He's also an investor, mentor and rockstar chairman to Productive Machines and Tuber. We're joined today by a very special guest, Dr Tim Craggs, CEO and founder at Exciting Instruments. Tim, welcome to Traction. How's it going?
Brilliant. Great to be here. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Excellent. You'll have to forgive my ignorance of these matters. Exciting Instruments was built to unlock single molecule fluorescence spectroscopy. I don't have a clue what that means. Can you give us the simple version, please?
Absolutely. So our instruments enable you to detect one molecule at a time. And that's really important because if you think about, you go to a basketball game in the US, you've got really tall players on the pitch, but there's only however many of them, 10 or whatever. And then you've got all the rest of us mere mortals looking on from the stands. If you were only have access to the average height, right, you'd just be wrong. There'd be all these tall people over here, your average would be here, and you have all the shorter people over here. Biology is just the same all the way through. So it's really important that you can look at one molecule at a time, what shape a molecule is in. That's critical for its function. But it's also about just that limit of detection, that if you can detect one molecule, well, that's literally the limit of detection. Either a molecule is there or it's not. And so that really lends itself to applications across, yes, of course, academic research, but also biopharma, so drug development, drug discovery, drug screening, and mechanism of action, but then ultimately into diagnostics, where you want to detect the first cancer biomarker, right? Not the stage 3 tumor. You want to detect the first aggregation event of a protein, not the plaque on the brain in dementia. And so that's where we're going. It's that individual single molecule detection. And we've combined that and just put it on the benchtop in a super easy to use fashion.
I heard a description you made previously about how this works like a flotilla of speedboats and measuring the tracks behind them.
That is not one I remember talking about.
Maybe that was maybe that was your co-founder.
Yeah, maybe.
I thought that's quite a good one.
Yeah. So the key thing is that you want to be able to follow individual molecules. That's absolutely important. And then it's married up with that detection exactly. So I think there's lots of different ways you can think about it. But ultimately, we're really really laser focused on those sorts of really making this easy for people. This is not a brand new technique. This was developed, the single molecule kind of fret that we use that looks at distances in molecules, what shape they're in. The first measurements it's coming up 30 years now since Tag-Chip Pa in Shimon Weiss's lab at UCLA performed those experiments. 1996, that first paper was published. So it's not new, but what is new is we've taken effectively, an instrument that, is now often the size of a room. It's like a mainframe where computing was all those years ago, right? And we've literally made it into the desktop version that literally goes on the benchtop and is super easy to use.
And I think really exciting in terms of the applications, right?
So that's that's the name, right? The name is interesting. I think it's a bit punny, which is fun for trademarking, it turns out. But we excite the molecules with the laser, so that's part of the pun. But it's an exciting instrument because it enables so much really great research and the great possibilities in terms of the diagnostics and the drug development going forward. Yeah.
So what's the benefit to your customers there? Are you enabling them to do it faster, cheaper, better? What's the advantage of working with you guys?
All three, right? I think what we're enabling people, especially, so our customer base is split across academic market and then sort of pharma, biotech, CROs, and then ultimately into diagnostics in 3-4 years' time. In the academic space, we're enabling people to do experiments they could never do before. So one of our first customers, Edwin Anthony in St. Louis, he couldn't do these experiments before. Now he can. He's got a paper that'll be coming out. It's come out already actually, and using our instrument. These are experiments that just were not possible in his lab. And before, people would have to collaborate with an expert to do this, or they literally have to build the instrument themselves. This is where it used to go, right? This is where it started. Science, people would have to build their own experiment. They build their equipment, but for it to be really useful to the widest possible user base, which is what our mission is, we talk about democratization, right? That's what we're really about, giving it to the people, right, in a way that makes it actually usable. People could we just make it easy for them to do these experiments? They can literally have this on their bench in their lab. They can make their sample, put it on, and get the data straight away.
So you've spun out of the university. There's a number of more. There seems to be lots of spin outs from the university these days. But what was it that was developed at the university that you were then able to spin out, and what were you then able to layer on top of that as a startup to leverage that technology? Great
questions. Yeah. So absolutely. Firstly, Andy Hogben's doing a great job, right, as head commercial, at the uni. Really, really excellent, because there have been more uni spin outs in the last few years, and that's been largely down to him, which is great, and he's been super supportive. What we did in my research lab, so I still wear half a hat there. Well, it's nowhere near half, but I still wear some hat there. Is we'd built an instrument that's the V0, I guess, the very, very earliest prototype, where we'd kind of got rid of the microscope body. We'd done about half of the development that was required to take us to what our actual product is, which is the EI Flex. It was still on a large optical table. It still needed to be in a laser-controlled environment. It kind of worked with the lights on, but not very well. But critically, it wasn't benchtop. But that was a piece of effectively, I solved a problem that I had. So in the UK, when you start a lab, at university, you don't get the sort of the US style startup money, right? In the US, you might get $1 million or $2 million to literally build your lab and hire some people and buy some equipment. Here you're lucky if you get maybe 20K. I was lucky to get a bit more than that, which was great, but it was nowhere near enough to buy one of these instruments for this type of single molecule work. So I had to build it. And that's what I did with 2 fourth-year students from the university over the course of 2016 to 2017. We built the Smurf box, as we've called it, the SMF box, single molecule FRET box, that's kind of what we've licensed from the university. That's what we've built the spin out on, is the idea of this democratization. We actually tried to give that away, right? And this is really important, I think, for people, because it turns out to really get the biggest reach. And this was totally antithetical to me. I thought if you give stuff away, everybody will take it, right? Well, actually, it turns out that to actually give some people something useful, they need a turnkey solution. And actually, that means it's got to be commercialized, because you've got to do that through a company. You've got to provide that layers of support. You've got to have the software support there. There's a whole ecosystem that goes behind this. And so whilst we were very open source with the very, very first version of the instrument, we've now taken that into the company. We've built upon it, layered up on it, built upon the IP there, now got a patent in that space. And so we've got that moat, that protectable IP, which we're building out on as well. And so but that was really important, and actually one of the triggers. So it's still that same, we're still trying to grow the user base and give these really, really powerful methods to the widest possible, group of people. It's just that actually the method to do that turned out to be the company rather than, the research lab.
And how revolutionary is it what you're doing? How much of a step change is it on what was done before, or is it kind of a natural evolution?
I think if you talk to our customers, they absolutely love using this instrument. And I think that's the key, that what we've done is make something that is a game changer. It's an absolute game changer in usability and accessibility for these types of methods. And so rather than only 40, 100 labs around the world being able to do these experiments, 20,000 labs can now do these experiments, right? So that, I think, is an absolute game changer. I think the other piece there is around the, where this goes into pharma and into diagnostics. And so now, we're now building out the science team around the instrument as well and developing those assays. And that's going to be the magic. So I think the revolution here is is the combination. It's very multidisciplinary. It's not just the engineering or the hardware engineering. It's not just the software engineering. It's layering all of that with the science as well and bringing that together. And I think that's absolutely revolutionary. And there are very few other companies at all who are able to really operate at that world-class level in hardware, software, and science. And I think that's really the magic here.
You spoke about giving it away at the university open source and it not really picking up. And I think this is something interesting to talk about, because there is this this belief that often startups that are high tech have, that if they build the best product in the world, that it will sell itself. But you and I know it not to be true, but it drives so much behaviour, this belief. And so it'd be quite interesting to learn a little bit about that trial, that journey, that trying to give it away open source, and then the realization on how you've got to productize.
Yeah, so I think the reality is that if you giving it away, someone's still got to buy all of the componentry that was going in. And this is the Smurf box rather than the Flex, right? So it's a slightly different bill of materials and all of the rest of it. But you've still got to buy all those bits. And then you've got to build it. And you've got to make the software interact with the hardware. And if you've also got to hire the person that's going to do that. Now, once you've paid for all the bits and you've got the person, you paid for the person and they've done all the work, well, you've spent what you would have spent on the instrument, but when that person leaves, you haven't got a supported, a crafted, a field tested, robust system. You've got a home built thing that one person in the world knows how to work, right? That it just doesn't work. Also, when you're applying from an academic perspective, and certainly from a pharma perspective, no one would ever do that in pharma, right? But from an academic perspective, you couldn't actually get the money in a grant for it, because the idea was that you could do this, because we did give literal IKEA-style instructions, right? So literally anybody could build it, but you couldn't get funded to build it because no one believes that you've got the track record because you've never built one before. So that was the thing. And so for us, the thing was to take the idea of being able to do this in every lab and then actually make it possible. So but you're absolutely right that we can't just sit back on our laurels and say, well, we've made something great and people will come. That's absolutely not the case, right?
Well, I was going to say, there's plenty of examples, aren't there, of revolutionary technologies that you can't sell on the basis of the technology. It sounds to me that one of the challenges you have is you've got a way of working that a handful of people did once that you are now enabling thousands upon thousands of people to do. You built the technology. What is the challenge now in getting that customer base to shift and do something different that they weren't doing before?
So I think there's different customer profiles that we're working with, right? And some of those are actually not doing anything different to what they did before, because we're actually selling these instruments into labs that could build them themselves, but they don't need to anymore. They can get an instrument straight off the shelf that just works, and that's brilliant. And then the software around that is really helpful, from both the data acquisition being super easy, connected to the cloud for real-time analysis. All of this stuff actually adds significant value even to those labs. The next group of people, if we go kind of a little bit sort of a circle further out, which is another group, a bigger group of people, is those which we touched on before, who had maybe collaborated with one of these, 100 labs or whatever. Well, that's a good 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 labs there who now don't have to wait to send a sample and go, oh, is this labeled properly? Is it going to work? They've got it in their lab. They can literally do the experiment on their own bench, not have to wait to ship it, or even with the best will in the world, collaborators can be, they've got other priorities. It's always however invested you are in a project, there's always a different draws on your time. Whereas if it's just your project, you can drive it, it's there. I think that the bigger group, even than that, though, which we're starting to see, and we have examples of in our first 14 customers, right, even now, where is those people that have never collaborated in this space before, but they see the value. These are people who've done structural biology. They look at the shape of proteins and how they work, and they know that in crystallography, that's a very static snapshot, or in cryo-EM, it's in the name, it's literally frozen, right? So, but be able to look into solution at what the structures and the dynamics of those things are is hugely valuable. And so that's the spread now that we're getting in the academic space.
And are you selling to innovators and early adopters at this point, or is there now you have democratized it, you're now looking to kind of take it to more of a mass market that will need to see it proven by those earlier groups?
Absolutely. I think what's exciting for us now is that we have moved beyond that early adopter. I think we the first few instruments did go to really pioneering kind of people in the field that were like, I really want that new type of way of doing something. I've seen it there and I want to do it. And yeah, we'll take a risk because they're that kind of mentality. But I think we're really moving into early majority now. I was at a conference in Aspen. It's a hard life, right? It was a really great single molecule conference, and there, one of the scientists there came up to me and just said, "Look, I've been thinking about this instrument for quite a while now, but I've been speaking with one of your other customers, and they really love it, and so I'm comfortable that we should be making a purchase now." And so I think we are seeing that shift now to that mass market. You're right, that early majority do want a bit more of a proof point, yeah. And some of that is in the publications. We've got 2 or 3 papers where people have used the instrument, and that's been peer reviewed, and it's out there in the wild, if you like. So that's great, and that will only grow. So yeah, I think we're now at a point where we are going more application specific and showing the use in a number of different scientific areas.
Traction is brought to you by Roaring Mouse, the PR and content agency building some of the world's most innovative technology businesses, and Venture Community, a cooperative society where entrepreneurs, experts and founders come together to build and accelerate startups.
I'm still having a giggle about an early adopter academic getting turned down on his research grant for the IKEA furniture he's got to put together because he hasn't done it before. Tell us a bit about some of the most exciting applications of this technology. I mean, we've heard a bit about the sausage. Let's hear the sizzle.
Yeah, so look, there's a couple of bits that we're developing right now. We've got a new instrument that we're bringing out in the summer, which is actually a high throughput version, and that's just going to be automating everything that happens. That's a bit more sausage, isn't it? But that's massively interesting and exciting for pharma and biotechs and CROs. But what's really important is what goes on top of that, and that assay development of what people are going to use it for. Our instrument is uniquely capable, very, very good at detecting when 2 things interact. So that's something we've not talked about, and that's really important. Protein-protein interactions, protein-DNA interactions are absolutely critical for a lot of stuff. So there's some really exciting stuff there that would be really important in drug discovery and in pharma more generally. And so we've got a number of assays in that space. It's going to be really cool. I think that one of the really interesting assays that we're looking at is one that's able to detect the first immediate aggregation event, so that you've got your alpha-synuclein protein. This is the thing that causes plaques on the brain in Parkinson's disease. And we've got an assay where we can detect the very first aggregation event, that those 2 individual molecules coming together, and then we can detect that, and that could be absolutely transformational from a diagnostic perspective. Yes, all the reg testing and all the rest of it, that's a long way down the line. But even before that, there's stuff we can do in that space in a pharma-based assay, because if we've got a way of detecting that first event, we can also show whether, which of your million compounds you throw at it prevent that event. So there's a lot of excitement there around this sort of protein aggregation assay space, and how that ultimately it actually could eliminate symptomatic Parkinson's, right? Because if you catch it early enough, right, in a diagnostic, we have already the therapeutics and the drugs, but they're all preventative. But if you can catch it early enough, then you can say, right, you need that drug. We could literally eradicate symptomatic Parkinson's from the planet.
You talk about some companies. You talk about a kind of a lack of ambition, but that's a very high-level ambition. That's terrific.
One application, though, of this technology, and there's then going to be many, many more.
I think that's what's exciting. What we've built here is, it really is that classic platform technology that people, that real kind of nugget that people seek, for in this type of space. Because, and then it is that magic around that, because it's not just the hardware, like we said before, not just the software, but it's the science that it enables, and the kits that we develop, so that we ultimately ship, the whole end-to-end solution.
Well, biological peek behind the curtain, isn't it?
Exactly.
How have you, clearly there's lots of different applications that this could be applied to. How have you picked your bridgehead markets, where to go first?
Yeah, that's a question we're still working through, if I'm honest, right now. I think that from the instrument perspective, it was clear that because I'd come from academia and I knew that space, that was clearly going to be the first market that we went into for the instrument itself. From the assay perspective, we're actually now looking, we're looking to have 20 or 30 conversations. We've got a checklist of about 7 or 8 different assays that we think are going to be hugely valuable to biopharma. And we're now in the process of starting those conversations with a range of different tier 1 pharmas, some smaller biotechs, and some sort of contract research organizations as well. Because we want to make sure we're building something. And again, it's not just build it and they will come. It's like, no, be in touch with the customer at the beginning, right? Before you've invested all that time and effort and money into building something that no one wants. We've got an opportunity here. We've got a range of things that we know are going to be valuable. And so it's how the order that we kind of work through those is going to be driven by our customer base. And we're starting those conversations now.
We're talking about traction, but actually before that, in this case, discovery.
Absolutely. But I think the two, if you do it right, the two work together, because your discovery conversations become your first customers, right? So the two are not distinct in my mind, and the way that we operate this very much is all from a commercial kind of side, because ultimately we want to get those that, we want to build what's going to be of most value to people. It's going to really shift the needle, yes, economically, but also impact, right? That's really, really key for us too.
You did I think a £4 million seed round last year. How was that experience for you? What did you learn doing it?
How long have you got? No, look, firstly, we were super proud of that, right? Actually, I think that is a chunky seed round for anywhere in the UK. That's a decent amount of cash, and that's giving us the opportunity to really accelerate everything that we're doing, which is super exciting. I think that there were a lot of things. We'd bootstrapped our way for the first 3 years of our existence. We'd had bits of grant money from the uni, and with debt finance guaranteed against our houses. It's been, we'd done it on hard mode, I guess, but we'd also done it by selling instruments, right? So we've now done nearly 2 million in revenue, and a good 1.5 of that came before the seed round investment in November. And actually, I think that was critical to the success of the round, because also it meant that we weren't, unlike a lot of companies at this stage, we had the revenue coming in, so we were never quite up against that cliff edge where you really is all or nothing, right? And you've got to do a deal, because otherwise, that is the worst possible place to do a deal from, right? Because they've got you right, literally, just. So to be quite right.
How long did you spend negotiating the term sheet then? From
well,
the first term sheet to the one you signed.
Yeah, months.
Because there are lots of startups. They'll see the first term
because
sheet.
They couldn't, right? Because sorry, go on.
They'll see the first term sheet. They'll be like, "Yeah, give us the money." But actually, there's a really, really important process that starts there about negotiating it out. Absolutely. And you were in a strong position because of your revenue streams and your income streams that you could negotiate hard.
Yeah, and I think negotiation is about coming to a fair solution. One of the key things for us is it's about reasonableness and fairness, right? And that's the thing. I think the other thing it did is it allowed us to extend the additional time gave us time to bring in a wider syndicate as well, and not just have to close at 2.5, which is maybe where we might have ended up, or even lower, right, before that. I think that, that having time is actually really valuable, and being able, not being, it's all about that negotiating power, just the situation that you're in, right?
And without giving away any details, how much movement did you get between the first term sheet and the last? Because obviously you couldn't give away details for confidentiality.
Yeah.
As a percentage or some sort of
I think,
qualitative measure.
I mean, I think the bigger change was in the actual size of the round rather than in the individual terms. I mean, the terms did change, and favourably for us over time, because it became clear there was, as we built out new people coming into the syndicate and other things like that, So, but I think everyone was very happy where we ended up, right? And I think that's actually what's important. Of course, it was different to the very first kind of thing that came down, but I think but I think there was give and take actually as well. So I don't think it was just like, well, if you do that, then we would need this, and then you have a discussion and you re-equilibrate, right, and you even up somewhere that everybody can live with, and that's
bring in a bit of competition, right? Bring in a bit of bit of tension in order to get the deal that you need. Yes,
but also I think it's really important that that you're going to work with your investors for the long term, right? And so actually, I think this part of the process where you're doing this, it's a really good sign of how things are going to be later on. And I think I was really keen that this shouldn't be adversarial. That for me is not helpful. Right? It's like, what is the win-win here? How do we solve, what are we solving for is one of our investment directors, sort of words I think I learned from her, but trying to get to a joint win-win, that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to do that in a way that, is sensible and is kind of collaborative, actually. Right? And exactly. And because because ultimately you want to be, you need as a company and as a management team to be completely aligned with your investors as well, because you want to be pulling in the same direction, and that starts when the relationship starts.
So how are you going to use that funding, and where do you need it to get you to, so you can then do a bigger Series A round?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing is team build out, right? So we've been 4 people, give or take, for the first 3 years of our existence, up until January, basically, pretty much. Since January, we've now added 6 more, so we've now got 10 of us, absolutely all A-star, like, they are just brilliant. One guy literally flew from Australia, relocated here, to brilliant single molecule expert, fabulous marketing team, brilliant engineers, hardware, software, awesome chief commercial officer. So that's been absolutely excellent, right? So building out the team is really important. We've got bespoke facilities that are just being finished. You haven't heard too much of the banging, actually, have you? But literally in the floor above here, massive 4,000 square foot thing that's been made possible through the investment, also through investment zone money, through the South Yorkshire Mayoral Authority, through Simca, which has been brilliant as well. So there is this, that's really important, and that we'll come maybe onto that later. The ecosystem, which is really essential. But so the space, and then it's giving us. We are productizing the high throughput instrument, so that's going to be going through reg testing later in the summer, so we can land that into pharma. And that's really the drive now, is the development of those assays to the point at which they are kits and usable as consumables by a growing pharma base.
Now, I had a look at your LinkedIn profile, which shows a very, very impressive academic path. So universities of Cambridge, St Andrews, Yale, Oxford, Bristol, and finally Sheffield. And these are places where people are building great biotech businesses, great technical businesses. What was it about Sheffield that made you choose to stay here and build a business here, rather than any of those other terrific places that would probably bite your arm off to have a business of your potential there?
So Sheffield gave me a job, right? I mean, so the academic process and career pathway is very non-linear, and so Sheffield was the first permanent academic post I had. They took a punt on me when in 2016 that I came here to set up my lab for the first time. Prior to that, I was a PhD student in Cambridge, a postdoc in St Andrews, a postdoc fellow in Yale and Oxford and Bristol. And so that was not, I was working in somebody else's teams in those things. I've learned a huge amount. In Oxford, I was working closely with Achilles Kapanidis, who span out ONI, Oxford Nano Imaging. I was very working with Hagen Bailey of Oxford Nanopore. So I've seen a lot of what's possible, I guess, and it's sort of been like, well, why not, right? If people they're doing it, why shouldn't we do it? So Sheffield was then where I was, I guess, and but I have to say the uni has been very, very supportive. The city is gearing up now to be supportive. There is this a real critical mass of spin-outs you mentioned earlier growing, but not just spin-outs, but startups of venture. There is a real understanding that there is a real opportunity here in Sheffield to grow and scale businesses like ours, and that's really exciting.
Let's talk about scale. There hasn't been as much banging from upstairs as
No.
I anticipated, but that's a bigger space that's being built out. But when you look forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how exciting could exciting instruments be? What does the end game look like for you? So
we're very, very focused on building something of scale and of value right now, and that, so to sort of say, I think we haven't got a specific exit in mind, right? There are a number of opportunities there. We expect to be getting offers as we build value, right? That could be initially, it could be trade sale to, one of many sort of life science tools type conglomerates, and there's lots of that. And this sector is absolutely rife with sort of that sort of M&A activity and sort of that sort of thing. So that's one possibility. We actually have an ambition to build this as big as we can, right? We're going to be hiring people in the US in the coming weeks. We've got already 80% of our business in the US. We've got instruments in Europe, instruments in the UK. We've got a really ambitious but tractable plan for global expansion beyond even those territories. And I think that, and also sector expansion, as we've talked about, initially this 2 million revenue has been through in the academic space, but we're now spinning out our, the instruments for pharma and for biotech. And the consumables that will go alongside those will be massive ARR generators. So the model sort of switches a little bit more from capex to that recurring revenue model, which is very, very attractive from a kind of value perspective. In terms of overall size, there's no way we're not going to be 100 people in 3-4 years time, and doing, even on our current product base, tens of mil in revenue is absolutely achievable.
You spoke about doing, I think, 80% of your business in the US.
Yeah.
These are interesting times.
They are.
to be trading with the US. Have you felt the impact of recent decisions? When you look forward, what are your concerns and worries, and what's the strategies for overcoming?
Yeah. So look, I think we've had to reassess just how many of our eggs go in the US basket right now. The academic funding situation over there is really challenging. There's been a lot of grants are being paused at NIH, even NSF. I was reading today is potentially affected as well. And a lot of my colleagues, scientists over there, I'm in touch with all of the time, customers of ours. And it is really hard for them right now. So that is having a real impact on the speed of people, of customers, in our pipeline. Right now, those scientists are really struggling, and so that's super hard. I think we are really happy. We've just closed a really great sale in New York actually, and so that's going to be. There is still funding available for people, so it's not a complete kind of turned off all the taps, but it is a change. And I think understanding that, and then understanding the whole tariff kind of situation as well. And we are just getting through into that detail now. We're in contact with the Department for Business and Trade and Business, whichever way around it is. I never know. Too many acronyms for my dyslexic head. There's things for us to understand, and it does impact, where we, as I say, where we distribute our sales and marketing resource. But actually, it's, there's still opportunity, absolutely still opportunity in the US. There's opportunity in Europe. There's opportunity in the UK. So we're still very bullish about all of this.
And you're serving some interesting markets though, so places like pharma and medtech, where it's quite typical that you spend a lot of money for a long time to get something to the point where it needs to be so that it can be used en masse, and then become profitable at some point. Is that going to have to be similar for your offering, or is it, are you in a position to be able to choose when you might want to become profitable?
So because of the way we've done this in selling into multiple different sectors, we've kind of chosen that route very carefully so that it's kind of, we operate largely in a pre-regulatory space to begin with, which is very much quicker to get stuff done, right? And so actually that, the very fact that we were able to bootstrap ourselves tells you that we can operate in a cash efficient manner that, means that, yes, okay, you add one more sale and then in fact, we did make a profit in year 2 of our existence of, maybe it was 20k, but that we were literally profitable in year 2. So it's not, now we're not right now because we're expanding and we're growing, and so we're investing right now for that future growth. But we will. It's not going to be. It's not like a drug where it's literally make or break in the clinical trial 7 years in, 10 years in, and tough if it's not, right? or and that's not how that market works either, because as a biotech, you'll grow something and when it looks promising, one of the big boys will snap you up, right? So there's different models, but the reality is we can be, we will be profitable on our current projections. We will be profitable next year.
I think one of the things I like about your journey, which is very Sheffield, is being scrappy.
Absolutely.
You were in this situation that at the university, the equipment you wanted to do, what you wanted to do, was far beyond the budget or the reach. But you were able to make something better, smaller, cheaper through being scrappy.
Yeah.
And then there's the realization that the thing that you've made can then be better, smaller, cheaper, even further. And that productization of that. And then the bootstrapping of a business around hardware. It's very admirable, but also very Sheffield.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Look, and I think my co-founder Rob Bell should take a lot of the credit here as well, from a bit more from that software background. That drive to just sell something. We sold the first 2 instruments before we'd built them here in Sheffield. So we were able to get out there and sell, which in hardware is unheard of. Right, and I think because we'd had that prototype there, we had demonstrable value of what these instruments can do, and we're able to show that. But no, I think being able to thank you, I guess, is probably what I just said. But no, it's been it's a wild ride and it continues. It's not I think it never feels like you're done, right? And maybe that's the entrepreneur. Just the life, right? But it's just it's always like when people ask how you're doing, it's like, we're getting there, right? And then maybe for a day when we closed the round, we felt, great. But then you've now got the next set of milestones, the next set of development, the next set of things that you want to hit, the targets to go. And that's what we live for, right? That's the drive, is that it's like, well, great, we're here now, but now we're going there. And when we get there, well, then we'll be going there. So it never stops. And it's kind of fun, right?
One of my favourite questions to ask the angels when they come onto the show is, what's the favourite thing you found in the Sheffield shed? Yeah. It's like there's a lot of professors and doctorates and people that that have a shed of amazing technology that's the world's best in something or other. I think there's a lot of potential around here.
I think there's massive potential. I think the both unis have got really good stuff coming out of them, right? It's not just uni of, but Hallam as well has got some really great people doing great stuff. So I think there's a real opportunity here. There's a real hotbed of innovation, to be tackled, and it's how, and I think with Northern Gritstone, who are our lead investor, who established through the universities of Sheffield and Leeds and Manchester, that pot of cash there is helpful. It's not just VCs, right? But that doesn't hurt because of the deep pockets there. But also that angel networks that yourself and others have been cultivating, involved in. It's all builds that ecosystem that really makes things possible. And I think that's critical to the success of individual companies, but also the region.
From what it is you're doing, there's several different things. It's not just a technology play, is it? There's clearly a technology element, there's a pharma element, there's a bioscience element, there's a manufacturing element, which are all areas where Sheffield is strong or getting stronger. Can you think of anywhere else in the world which has that kind of that unique combination of kind of capabilities?
Look, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of those elements here in Sheffield, which is absolutely excellent. I think, from the manufacturing perspective, there's that long history, obviously, there, but that's also been modernised massively, and that's really interesting. I think what also you have in Sheffield is a quality of life in terms of bang for your buck, and that's not just from a personal perspective, but also from a commercial perspective within the company. If we were looking at different places to go and take space, and it would cost us 3 times to go to Cambridge or Oxford or London, if not more, and even double to go to Manchester and sort of Alderley Park, things like that. So there's good reasons that are beyond the skill sets. I think there's work to be done there, and we're working with Simca and the combined mayoral authority and the council there to think about overall skills building into the future, because I think whilst there's pockets of excellence in all those areas, what you haven't got is 100 biotech companies that, when one's slightly shrinking, the other one can just hoover up the great talent that's there without anyone having to move. So whilst we've been able to hire great people right now for a team of 10, I think, let's see if we're trying to hire for a team of 100, I think that becomes a slightly different question. And so we're working closely with Paul Johnson and a few others within the mayoral authority to think about how do we future-proof the city for some of these things. Because you're right, it's really great, the pockets of excellence in all of these areas. But how do we build on that to really grow that into a sufficiently large critical mass and ecosystem that can rival Cambridge, Oxford, California, Palo Alto, sort of, that sort of thing. But I wouldn't be doing it anywhere else at this point. Right? I think there is that mixture of rebel and innovation together. I think is really interesting. I think that as we scale, I think we're starting to see this as well. Though I think that there is a need for evolution of that into a really professionalized, systematized scale up. And I think that for me, that's the next stage of not just our journey, but probably for the region as well, because I think we're very good at that elbows out, like we've talked about, really that cracking on that scrappy stuff. And that's brilliant. And you need to keep an element of that. But actually, if we're really going to compete on the global scale, which we already are, right? But we're going to do this really well, we've got to professionalize and systematize that. We can't lose that edge, right? That edginess, right? And that real detail, fight and rebelliousness, I guess, right? But we've got to capture that and make it and professionalize it. I think
you've got that scale up, that formalization process, but that's part of the journey.
Absolutely.
And one thing I think, if you look at VC law 101, it's like you want scrappy founders.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've got scrappy founders.
Very much so. Great.
That's all for now. From all of us here at Traction, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for being part of the show. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, share, follow us for future episodes. Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.